everyone, welcome back. My name's Morgan. This is my channel Pisces Paperbacks, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about what my goals are for 2021. So 2020 has been a bit of a shit show, just in general, on a lot of levels, and I think it's good to set some goals for 2021 in order to not maintain a sense of normalcy, because what is normal at this point, but just to kind of make sure that I'm like not completely falling apart as a human being. So that's what I want to do today. I have a few like general reading goals, I have a few channel goals, and then I have 5 books that I specifically want to try reading this year. Last year I only read 2 of the 5 books that I had selected that I wanted to read in 2020, but one of the things that I did read was the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, which like counts as 3 books, so whatever. Honestly, I feel pretty good about that, even though it was just 2 out of 5, because one of the things I do is I choose books that I think are a bit scary or challenging, so reading any of them is good in my book. Alright, let's get started. In 2020, I made my Goodreads goal 120 books, and I surpassed that in October, I believe. So this upcoming year, I'm going to make my reading goal 150 books. I'm a little nervous because the second I set an expectation, I'm like, maybe I don't want to do that anymore. But I honestly think I can do it. My reading has been more and more consistent, more and more exciting as I get a little bit more of a handle on ways that I like to read. I just got a Kindle. That's gotta help me. But that is like what my Goodreads reading goal is going to be. If I don't get there, I'm not gonna punish myself, but I like to set lofty goals. Next, I'd like to get my owned unread books down by like a significant amount. I think I have on this shelf right over here, you can't see, 75 around books that I own that are unread. They're still TBR books, and I'd like to get that down to 50 if I can, and part of that is going to be listening to the audiobooks of books I own and not just waiting for the perfect time to pick up the physical copy, because more and more I found that I'm really intimidated by larger books physically. Like reading a 600-page book really scares me now, and I don't know like when that happened, but it's something I'm working on. So hopefully I can use all of the audiobooks that I listen to really get through a good portion of my unread books, because I'd like to get it down a little bit. I look at it and sometimes I'm like, I have so many books that I want to read, and yet I just keep using the library. So if I could just focus on that, that would be great. Another goal of mine is to continue the nonfiction reading in my life. Specifically, in order to like keep that up, I'd like to read at least 1 nonfiction book per month, hopefully 2 or 3, but I can't always get there and I'm not always in the mood, so at least 1 per month. And I'd really like to vary the topics. This year I focused a lot on nonfiction books about race and systemic racism and inequality, and I think those are really important, but I'd also like to read more subject-based nonfiction as well. So in 2019 I read Code Girls, and I really loved it, and that was about code breakers in World War II. So I'd really like to mix up the nonfiction that I'm reading in order to get like a wider grasp on like the nonfiction books that are out there, because I feel like I've been pretty focused this year, not in a way that I disliked. I loved all the nonfiction books that I've read this year with like very few exceptions, but I would just like to diversify. Speaking of diversification, I just looked at my list, and the next thing I want to talk about is the number of white authors I read. So in the middle of this year, I think all of us kind of took a look at what we were reading, and some of us may have noticed that the diversity of authors and stories that we're reading is not what we expected it to be, or not what we thought it was. So I never really tracked like the race or identity of the authors I was reading before 2020. It was just on the spreadsheet that I decided to use, so I was putting it in there. And I was embarrassed to find that I had read, I think, 75 to 80% white authors in 2020 up to that point. And I made it a really purposeful part of the book selection process going forward to try and get that number down. And I believe I'm going to finish the year having read 63% white authors, which, while better than 80, is still really not what I want. It's not what I want my reading to look like. It's not what the world looks like, and it's not what publishing should look like. Going forward, I would just like to continuously get the number of white authors that I'm reading down. I would like to read more authors of color. Specifically, I would like to read more Indigenous authors and Latinx authors. Those were the two smallest proportions that I read this year, but I would just like next year to be less than 63% white, and I would like the year after that to be less than next year's percentage of authors being white, and just kind of make that a continuous ongoing project. There's not a specific number that I'm shooting for. I just want to get to the point where I choose thoughtfully when I'm looking at the books that are being marketed to me, and get to the point where I really feel like my reading represents the world that I see. So that is one of my goals. The only channel goal that I have is to try and do one dedicated book review video per month. That's something that I enjoy doing. I get really good comments and discussion in the comments on those videos, which is something I really enjoy. And I think they force me to be a more thoughtful reviewer, and that's something that I really want to work on, because oftentimes I find that I can't quite verbalize how I feel or my thoughts about a book in a way that is useful to people hearing me talk about a book. So I think trying to do at least one dedicated review video per month will kind of push me in the right direction. And I'm also interested in looking into more year-long reading challenges, not just the Goodreads reading challenge number, but specific challenges, because I love readathons, but I often find the prompts in such a limited time stressful, and I think the idea of a year-long readathon where you start the year with this number of prompts and you can work on it throughout the course of the year is just interesting to me. It's something I want to try. And it's also something I didn't even think of trying until Books and Lala moved her buzzwordathon readathons to this monthly thing that is going to happen. So if you haven't heard of it, I will link the announcement video in the description. Basically, Kayla at Books and Lala used to do these buzzwordathon readathons where for a week you'd read books with a specific word in the title that was just a popular word among titles at the time. And in order to make it more interactive and also able to happen more often, she moved it to this reading challenge or reading event on Goodreads where there's a word that's already been picked out, so you can plan ahead, which I love, a word that's picked out for every month, and you can read the buzzword book every month if you'd like. So I just find that so fun, and I want to try and do that specific year-long reading challenge next year, but if there's others that I find, that'll be fun too. Okay, on to the 5 books I'd like to read this year, next year, 2021. Starting off strong, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This 800-something page behemoth is something that I bought at an independent bookstore when I was living in Houston, and I just love the paperback. I don't know, it's so floppy but so big, but that's so scary. I mentioned earlier I'm having trouble with long books and I want to read it. I honestly don't know what it's about. I do know what it's about, but people don't really talk about the plot when they talk about this book, and the fact that most people find it a 3.5 to 4 star that I've seen also makes me nervous, but I still want to try and read it this year. The second book I want to try and read in 2021 is The Vanishing Half by Bennett. Everybody was talking about this book a couple months ago, and I've heard for very good reason. This is kind of inspired by Passing. It's about 2 very light-skinned black sisters who go very different paths in their lives and the kind of consequences and intricacies of those decisions. And 1, I don't really read that much historical fiction. 2, I especially don't read hard-hitting topic books, but this just seems so fascinating. It's had such good reviews. It's not that long at all, but it might just be a very tall book. But this is something that I've really been wanting to read from the moment people started saying it was good. And I'm so glad that I got it from Book of the Month while I was still getting Book of the Month. So yeah, this is one that I really want to read. Very different from that, the next book I want to talk about is Good Omens by Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. This is another book that I've mentioned, not in last year's goals video, but in tag videos about books that I want to read. This always comes up, and it's true. I want to read it. I think that I would really like the style of humor in this fantasy, and I really want to watch the show. I've literally read Good Omens fanfiction inspired by the show because I was there's some tropes in there that I'm interested in, but why can't I just read the book? I just want to read the book. Why can't I just get through it? I've picked it up before and I read the first 3 pages and was like, I'm not in the mood, but I still want to read it. So this is a book that I want to read in 2021. I think it's time. Next is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This was a gift from my Aunt Carly, and it's, again, historical fiction, so books that a genre that I don't read that often, even though I like it and I'm interested in it. So this is just something that I'm interested in. I've heard good things. I'm interested in it also because the fact that the author has remained anonymous. This is a pen name. No one knows who the author is, and I just find that so interesting. Also, the movie or the mini series that was made off of this came heavily recommended by my grandpa, who is a funny man. So I'd like to read this as well. I think it would be nice. And lastly, A Heart in a Body in the World by Deb Caletti. This is a book that I only bought a couple months ago, and I've heard good things about it, specifically I think from Mara at Books Like Whoa. I might have been mentioning her a lot in my videos recently, but I just really like her. I like her taste in books. I like her videos. But this is another like hard-hitting topic book. It's one of the reasons I don't really like YA contemporaries often, because I find that they are usually, in my opinion, in my like brain, they feel very like special episode of a family sitcom that they would like make you watch in school if you're learning about bullying or something like that. And I often just find them cringy, but I've heard such good things about this one, and I know that it really deals with trauma and healing and grief, and those are things that I enjoy reading books about when they're handled well. So this is the book that I've heard very good things about, and I would like to read it this year because I know that this is a book that I could just own and keep putting off forever. But honestly, I really like the cover, even though it's like this beige kind of parchment-y cover, which doesn't often appeal to me. I just really like it, and I'm excited for it, so I want to get to it. Okay, so those are all of my goals for 2021. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what books you'd really like to read next year. I always think it's fun to talk about the books that I want to read and then never read them, but hopefully I actually get to them this time. So I hope you liked the video. Leave me a comment and I will respond, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!